Hey, what's up guys? It's me, ThePsychNPDavidC. So a question I get asked all the time is, what was your clinical experience like in NP school? A lot of people think like the classes and exams in NP school are the hardest part, but in my opinion, I think the hardest part is actually the clinical rotations. I think that's where a lot of the real learning happens. Like it's gonna teach you real life practical skills instead of just like textbook theories and stuff. So in this video, I'm gonna share my clinical experiences at my school, starting with how hard it was to find a preceptor, all the way to what I learned at the end of my rotations. Let's talk about it. This video is for educational purposes only and is not meant to be medical advice. Okay, so starting with what my experience was like actually finding a preceptor, I went to a school in Southern California. The program was basically 2 years long, and we didn't start our clinicals until the second year. So for my school, they wanted us to try to find our own preceptor first before they were willing to help us find one. So they had this thing where you have to have tried to contact at least like 5 different preceptors or preceptor sites, and they would only help you if you documented that all 5 preceptors or preceptor sites were not able to get you a preceptor. So I had to ask people like my former coworkers who were now NPs or like psychiatrists at my own hospital. So I just put down like 5 different people and the reason why they couldn't precept me. So then my school had to help me find one. And they did. The only thing is that the preceptor they found me was literally 52 miles away. And with that preceptor's schedule, I had to go at least 2 or 3 times a week. So I'd be driving 52 miles there and 52 miles back at least 2 times a week just to fulfill my clinical hours. And I was just like, that's gonna be a super big pain in the you-know-what for me. So I tried even harder to find another preceptor. So I ended up finding this outpatient clinic that was about 20 minutes from me, and they were accepting student applications on their website. So I applied and eventually got an email back from one of their NPs who was willing to precept me. But there was a catch. She was gonna charge me $1,000 per quarter. I had to do 3 quarters to meet my clinical hour requirements, so basically it would cost me $3,000. And then I did some research and found that it's actually pretty common for NP preceptors to charge their students. What I found was the average that they charge is about $12 per clinical hour. So my program required 500 clinical hours, so basically that'd be $6,000 if I chose to stick with that preceptor. So I had to pretty much weigh the benefit of like my clinical either being free, but I have to drive 52 miles, or I can pay this preceptor $1,000 per quarter, but it's only a 20-minute drive. Eventually, I just chose to pay the preceptor because I really didn't want to drive 52 miles 2 to 3 times a week. So I emailed her back saying like, oh yeah, I accept the terms, I'll do the payments, and like how to prepare for our first day. She said all I needed to bring was my own laptop. So first day, I arrived at the clinic and, meet everybody, the receptionist, my preceptor, other NPs at the clinic. And she was like, okay, for the first day, you're just gonna sit right next to me. You're gonna see how I do things and you can just observe and take notes. So at the end of the day, I was like, okay, cool, that wasn't so bad. But then the next day, she's like, okay, from now on, you're on your own. You're gonna have your own room over there and you're gonna see your own patients. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I want you to see some of my patients and just message me about their information, your assessment, your diagnosis, and what your treatment plan is. And then I'll come into the room afterwards. At that point, I was a psych nurse for over 5 years, so I already had a lot of experience doing like assessments and admissions, so it wasn't really a big deal with me. So, as I'm calling in the patients and I'm talking to the patients with my laptop in front of me, I'm like quickly typing down like my assessment, diagnosis, treatment plan. And while I'm talking to the patient who's right in front of me, I'm like messaging my preceptor at the same time with all this information. So it's a lot of multitasking. If I wasn't able to type fast, I definitely have a bad time. And yeah, at the end of it, I just messaged my preceptor like, oh, okay, I'm ready. And then she'd walk in the room and just like confirm everything with the patient. And if she agreed with my treatment plan, we'd just run with it. But if not, then she'd do her own thing. And then after the patient leaves, she'd explain to me why she chose to do that treatment plan instead. And then basically rinse and repeat until we're done seeing our patients for the day. My preceptor chose to only have 15 minutes for follow-up patients. So if I ever ran behind on time, she'd just see the patient herself until I was ready to see the next one. I had to catch up on a lot of documentation at the end of the day. I would guess I probably stayed over about 30 minutes to an hour after seeing our last patient just to finish documentation and everything. And I only got one 30-minute lunch break. Usually there's like a pharmacy rep who will bring free lunch as long as you attend their presentation on whatever drug they're advertising. And then then whenever we had downtime between patients, I could just ask my preceptor any questions that I had. At the beginning, I was really slow. I would see maybe 1 patient per hour, maybe 2. But by the end of it, I was able to do like 2 or 3, or even sometimes all 4 in the same hour. There were definitely times where I just had absolutely no idea what to do regarding that patient's treatment plan. Like, I had a teenage boy come in with his mom, and his mom told me that he just suddenly became non-verbal like 2 months ago. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know what to do for this kid. And there's also going to be a lot of patients who don't want to see students. So during that time, I'm either finishing up on documentation or looking up information on upcoming patients. And one thing I will never forget is always leave the door slightly open. I had a patient who was like a 15-year-old female, and she was willing to see a student, which was me. So she was there in the lobby with her mom, and I called her into my office. And for some reason, I wasn't thinking, and I closed the door the whole way. So I was in there by myself with a 15-year-old female patient. And then a couple minutes later, my preceptor tells me like, oh, her mom's uncomfortable with me being in there by myself with her. So my preceptor just came in there with me for the rest of the appointment. You should also always leave the door slightly open just in case there's like an emergency. Like, it never happened to me, but if a patient suddenly becomes like violent or aggressive, you want to be able to call for help like immediately. So that clinical rotation was actually where I did the most learning. To this day, I still use a lot of the same things I learned from that clinical, like the same templates and the same verbiage and stuff like that. So even though it was tough, it was definitely where I learned the most in school by far. I ended up really appreciating how my preceptor kind of just threw me in the Shark Tank on day 2 and was like, you either sink or you swim. At the end of it, I was pretty much doing Psych NP work, and not only was I doing it for free, but I actually had to pay somebody to do their work for them. But the good thing is, my preceptor was actually one of the best preceptors I could have asked for. She was very like knowledgeable, straight, direct. She taught me a lot of like real life strategies. So even though she charged me, I actually learned like so much from her. Like, I still text her here and there nowadays if I ever need like advice or anything. So yeah, even if a preceptor tries to charge you, it doesn't mean they're automatically going to be bad. And there are some preceptors who will still do it for free nowadays, but they're a lot harder to find. And I actually had another preceptor at a different location that was all telehealth, and all I would be doing is listening to their Zoom call from my home. And that preceptor had me in a Zoom call with like literally 10 other students. So as you can imagine, I barely learned anything from that rotation. So I definitely recommend finding a preceptor that will be in person and has only 1 or maybe 2 students max. And I would definitely expect to be charged just because that's how it is nowadays. So yeah, that was just my experiences with my clinicals. It's definitely going to vary a lot depending on your preceptor and the location. You're definitely going to feel nervous and anxious at the beginning, and maybe even for the whole time that you're there, but you're gonna learn so much if you have a good preceptor. I would say that about 90% of what I learned in school came from clinicals, while the other 10% was like lectures and quizzes and stuff. Like, in real life practice, you're not going to be thinking about how like Florence Nightingale's theory of environmentalism is going to help your patients. So yeah, it definitely isn't going to be easy. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, but honestly, that's how you learn. Just make sure you have a preceptor who's willing to teach, because that's definitely what makes or breaks a clinical experience, in my opinion. If you have any other questions regarding Psych NP clinical rotations, you can leave a comment down below. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. It's going to help a lot more people see this video. I am also on TikTok and Instagram if you want to follow me over there at ThePsychNPDavidC. I do medication management for adults living in California. If you're interested, there's a link down below. And with that, your mental health just leveled up. You're welcome.